Georgia stomps Tennessee at home 31-17. I am shocked. Not with Georgia winning, but in the fashion that they did, because I thought Tennessee plus 9.5 was an absolute lock. I was expecting this to be one of those old-fashioned defensive slugfests where the final score is 16-13, and that didn't happen. Tennessee's offense didn't really get anything going after three out of four of their first drives. When they end up putting points up on the board, it goes into halftime tied 17-17. And at one point in this game, Tennessee was up 10-0. You was thinking that Tennessee was about to come into Georgia's trap and take over their trap, but Georgia responded. Carson Beck was balling all night long. This is the best game that Georgia has played all year long. This game was more impressive than their win against Texas a few weeks ago. It's hard to gauge how good Georgia actually is, because certain moments during this season you watch them and you think Georgia has fallen off. This is it for Georgia. When they got blasted by Alabama, although they came back in that game, you had concerns about the Bulldogs. And then they lose in really ugly fashion to Ole Miss after beating Texas. And before that Texas game, you were thinking that, okay, this Georgia team doesn't have a shot going on the road against Austin, and they end up pushing around Texas. And then you're thinking to yourself, okay, if you beat Texas, then you definitely are going to dominate Ole Miss. But the complete opposite happens. You get dominated by Ole Miss and you lose that game 28-10. It was one of the worst losses that we've seen the Bulldogs suffer under Kirby Smart in recent memory. And then you have this big game where your playoff hopes are on the line against Tennessee. And although Georgia was a pretty big favorite in this game, there were still a lot of skeptics out there. There were still doubters. There were people who wanted Mike Bobo fired. There were people saying that you can't trust Carson Beck in a game like this. But what Georgia has shown time in and time out this season is that they have the true heart of a champion. And I don't mean to say that to be cliche, but this is a team that they just find new ways to win. And tonight they won this game because Carson Beck had an outstanding performance. 346 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He was also making some dynamic plays with his legs. Carson Beck played like the best quarterback in college football tonight. This is the most points that Tennessee's defense has given up all year long. This is the best defense that Tennessee has had in program history. And for Georgia to play the way they did tonight was nothing short of impressive, because anytime it looks like the chips are down, Georgia's down and out, they just find a way to hit another gear, and they just continue to find ways to pull off these wins. And it's always different from the last one. The way they beat Texas was much different from the way they beat Tennessee tonight. Against Texas, Carson Beck had no touchdowns and 3 interceptions. They won in spite of him. And tonight, they played an all-around great game. After Tennessee's first 4 drives, when they scored on 3 out of 4 of them, their offense didn't do anything else. They got shut down in the second half. Nico Iamaleava, he couldn't complete a pass more than 20 yards downfield to save his life. And he's a very massive disappointment. After Georgia was able to kind of settle down and get back into the game, Nico just got rattled. And I expect him to improve, but it's just, when you think about the hype that he had coming into this season, how Tennessee fans thought that he could be a Heisman contender, once Tennessee stopped playing the Kent States of the world and they got into conference play, Nico looked nothing more but an average quarterback. And with this loss, I don't even know if Tennessee is going to be able to make it into the playoffs, because you could end up getting snubbed for a playoff spot by Indiana. You know, this was a game where I thought that Tennessee, although I didn't expect them to win, I thought they would be able to keep it close. You got a great defense. Your offense has a lot of weapons at wide receiver, and you're facing a Georgia team that is as vulnerable as they've ever been the last couple of years that they've been coached by Kirby Smart. This just was a shocking performance, in my opinion, with how Tennessee played. This was not a good game on their behalf. And I don't give a damn about the missed calls that the refs have. I hate how fans want to use refs as an excuse for why they lost. You lost this game by more than 2 touchdowns. You got outplayed, outcoached, and outclassed by Georgia tonight. I don't give a damn about the missed calls that the refs have, man. If you play better football, if Nico lived up to the hype that all you Vols fans were giving him coming into this season, you easily should have been able to go toe-to-toe with Georgia tonight. This isn't a stat Georgia team. This is one of the worst Georgia teams that we've seen on the field in the last 4 years. And this is supposed to be one of the best teams that you've ever had under Josh Heupel. And what do you have to show for it? A 31-17 beatdown in Athens, Georgia. I expected more out of Tennessee in this game. I really did. I really thought you were going to cover that 10-point spread, and you didn't come nowhere close to doing that. Georgia still owns you. Why do they call this a rivalry? This is not a rivalry. This is a one-sided affair. Every time Georgia plays Tennessee, they know it's a guaranteed dub. Nobody was ever concerned inside Georgia's building about if they were going to make it to the playoffs because they knew they were going to kick your ass, man. Tennessee, for as good as what they looked after they beat Alabama, they haven't played at that same level. You lose to Arkansas. You almost lose to Billy Napier in Florida at home. Tennessee just is not that good of a team. And I wouldn't be against the committee if they were to leave you out of the playoffs because you don't look better than Texas A&M. You don't look better than Alabama, who's beating more ranked teams than you. You know, Tennessee, for as hot as how they started the season off, it's really disappointing how they finished this season losing to Georgia the way that they did. I really expected this to be an all-time classic. I was not expecting for Carson Beck to pull a masterclass performance out of his ass. This was a great night for not just Carson Beck, but for everybody on that Georgia Bulldogs team that was doubted. From Kirby Smart to Mike Bobo to Carson Beck to the receivers. I didn't see any receiver depth issues tonight. It seemed like everybody they put in that wideout was making plays against a secondary that's been shut down all year long. Tennessee got humbled tonight. I don't want to hear anything about the refs. The refs are not why you lost this game. You lost this game because you just didn't belong on the same field tonight as the Georgia Bulldogs, man. Georgia once again shows why you should never count out the heart of a champion. No matter how down and out this team may look, you never know what they're capable of. And Georgia played like they were desperate tonight. And there's an old saying that one of the WWE announcers used to say, desperate men do desperate things. And Georgia was pulling out all the tricks tonight. Carson Beck saved his best performance for when Georgia needed it the most. And that was this game that pretty much was a playoff elimination matchup for them. Georgia loses this game, there are no playoff hopes. There is no shot at winning the national championship. There is no shot at getting back to the SEC title game. When Georgia's back is against the wall, this is when they're at their best. When you doubt them, when you count them out like we did a few weeks ago against Texas, they played their best football. And they did it tonight against a Tennessee squad that a lot of us thought was a really good ball club. And they give up 31, the most they've given up all season. Prior to this game, Tennessee's defense barely even allowed you to score 20 points. The offensive line played well. Everything that was criticized and scrutinized when it came to Georgia's team wasn't an issue because Georgia showed when they got to play their best football, when they got to, have a game where they can't make any mistakes and they got to lock in and focus, they always get it done. And that's what separates Georgia from the other teams that are in the middle of the pack, Tier 2 programs in this conference. They don't have championship DNA. That's why Georgia won this game.